Welcome back, everyone. So we're here tonight. We're going to talk about Dan Weil. Um, so what I'm going to do over the next 12 weeks is look at one of each week. Look at one of um, the key ideas of relationships. Someone who's introduced something original into the thought of relationships, though, like the foundational ideas of relationships. And Dan Weil is a therapist, or was a therapist, who, working with couples, he really noticed a lot of things that John Gottman credits him with being 20 years ahead of their work, as in he was the only person that kind of figured that out from hypotheses that the Gottmans later proved with their research. And he really got my attention with his quote, "When you marry someone, you marry a set of problems." Him and his wife, trained therapists in couples collaborative therapy. And his last book, which was released after his death, was Solving the Moment. Solving the Moment is really addressing the fact that most couples try to solve a problem, but they try to solve a problem without communicating clearly. And his goal is that we may or may not be able to solve the problem, but we can solve the moment. And solving the moment is really being alive and being present to what you feel and sharing what's really going on for you, so that you're able to talk about the problem. And it's something that I see in relationships. And I often think marriage is a vehicle for turning two people who love each other so much into two people that hate each other and can hardly be in the same room. So the work of Dan Weil is really uncovering what happens in that process. A couple that are so in love, how do they then become so hostile that they can only talk through lawyers, and all the kind of things that you see in relationships of people really hating their ex. So that's really what we're going to talk about tonight. And it's more like I'd like to share the ideas. I haven't fully worked through all the ideas and polished them, but there's so much that I just like to use as a jumping off point for us to apply the ideas and how they might apply to us. The question in the breakout room was, who of all the people that you've known in your life do you feel knows you the most? And to what extent do you feel that they know you? In your discussions, was there anything that struck you, any patterns or any insights, or was it different for anyone else than for yourself?
Pattern in our group was not family. It wasn't a family member. One, it was a boyfriend, one it was, and two friends. So it's, I suppose, somebody that we connect with rather than have a relationship with that is, family. You can't do anything about it, but somebody that you have chosen to be your friend or otherwise, in a relationship with. And it's the dynamics of family, I think, is what we sort of agreed on, is the common stumbling block to forming really, really close a really, really close relationship with somebody in the family in that way, that you completely, that would know you that way, because there are all sorts of variables involved in family relationships that sometimes prevent that kind of closeness with anyone, with, well, maybe one or two to that extent. Whereas a partner or a best friend, you really hone in on that one-to-one relationship.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's those dynamics that you've grown up with siblings, and there's a place in there, and there's family dynamics with parents, and you can notice yourself slipping back into the same roles and the same dynamics, whereas someone in a later relationship sees you more as you are, as you've grown. Carl.
Yeah, I would say the people who know me the best would be the police. I would say that it's a weird concept, isn't it? That, you know, if you work in an office, you spend more time with the people in the office than you do your own family. And yet we think biologically and socially our families to be closer, or should be, or fundamentally would be. Just very briefly, I had an odd experience once whereby I had some family members who I'd known all my life, but I never actually met them in a metaphysical sense until they had an accident and they were vulnerable. They were never open, they were never present. I'd never met them. Now that sounds like an odd thing to say, but there was never any connection, there was never any space to connect and integrate. So I think that's something that's worthy of note. In terms of the question, I'm going to give an offbeat answer if the first one wasn't offbeat enough, but the person who should know you best is yourself, but you can't say it's 100% because we're always learning about ourselves. So cliche and cheesy, I'll drop the mic now, but that's kind of, yeah, some of my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Is the intention behind the question is to think about and notice how much we reveal and how much people listen to who we are. That we often don't have a relationship with our partner. We have a relationship with a projection of our partner. He details lots of different ways in which we don't really say what we mean, and we don't listen as much. So like we all know the pattern of you meet someone, or it's easy to probably look at friends or other people in a relationship, and you see meet someone new, and they create this fantasy partner, like this is the perfect person, and the things that other people might say are red flags or are signs, they don't pay attention to, and later on they're the things where the relationship falls apart, but they were always there all the time. When you marry someone, you marry a set of problems, and this is really so my interpretation of that is that I think we have a dream, like we all, you know, like Martin Luther King, we all have a dream, and part of that is like we try and slot things in. This is like Daniel Sloss says in the jigsaw metaphor, that we all have this kind of idea of a jigsaw and we're trying to find our pieces. And what we're often doing is trying to find the right person that will complete our jigsaw. And if you look at any dating websites on profiles, what you'll see is people looking for someone to fit into their world. And what we're looking for really in that perfect partner is that someone fits the role that we expect from a partner. And often it can be because we feel we're lacking something. So I think one of the core stories that we have is the Wizard of Oz story, that, you know, like the Tin Man lacked the heart, the Scarecrow lacked the brain. All these people, like all of us, I think, feel that we're missing something. And the journey of life is recognizing that we always had it, but it was our perception. And so often I think we get a partner either that we don't feel worthy of. So we're looking for this aspiration. So like the typical one is like the idea of all men, whatever their age, their ideal partner is 22. And so you have 60-year-olds looking for that, and they think somehow like a 22-year-old supermodel is going to fall for them. And so sometimes it's feeling unworthy. But there's something like, whether it's someone who's more socially confident, whether it's someone who's got more resources, someone who's seems to have their life together, or and can cover the parts we feel we're lacking. There's something like that, but often people are looking for a partner to make up those aspects. And so the dream is that we don't have to change, but we get the partner that makes our dream happen. So, but the reality is that we are attracted to people before we know who they are. And so we're attracted to often the projection of someone, and we can project that they are everything that we hope they are. And we can fool ourselves and create that mirage. And what eventually happens is that problems show up in the relationships, and we think it's a problem of compatibility or a problem with the partner. And Danwell mentions this, I can't remember the exact terminology he uses, but he's like, well, he talks about most people, like secretly we want to change our partner, because most problems are down to our partner's defects. But if we look at like the other path that I see analogous to love and relationships is money and finding our way of surviving and succeeding. And what has to happen is we have to disillusion ourselves of the fantasy that we had. So when I was 7 years old, I wanted to be footballer for Liverpool and England. And as I've aged, I'm still trying, but as I've aged, the maturity is recognizing that the fantasies that we have aren't necessarily, you know, like everyone wants to be a pop star, everyone wants to be famous, everyone wants to be a sports star or a YouTuber now. And those dreams are based in a fantasy, which are symbolic for a feeling that we want. We want to feel successful, we want to feel popular, we want to feel respected. Whatever it is, the dream is a symbol for the state that we want. And so the problem is that when we pick a partner and it doesn't seem that the partner's matching up with that, we blame the partner and we think the problem is with the partner. But in a successful relationship, we lose our disillusionment of the dream. We let go of the dream and we recreate a more realistic dream. And this is what we have to do in order to find success in our career, is that we all, you know, like if you talk to 6-year-olds, they're like, I'm great at this. And they really think, or they want to believe that they've got this natural skill that they don't have to do any work, but they're going to be Wimbledon champion or MMA champion or whatever it is. The like gold medalists in the Olympics are the ones that have got up at 5 every morning, swum 3 to 5 hours a day, trained every day, whether they felt like it or not, and then they turn in their perfect performance. But the dream is that there's something special about us, that either people will recognize it. This is the Cinderella dream, that the prince will come along and recognize something that no one else did. The essence of problems in a relationship are our dream is immature. Our dream is that we can find a partner who will be exactly as we want and without us changing. So what we then have is we have a choice of, we either change the dream, which is about like evolving our desires and developing ourselves, or we change the partner and we just stay stuck in the same loop. Like, that's the core of the problem. What happens is often is first of all, he talks about, we don't expect problems, and because we don't expect them, we then think, okay, what's wrong? And either we go, look, clearly it's him. Look, I've got a defective partner. He just doesn't do this. He doesn't do this. She's the problem. Or we say, oh, it's me, and I should work harder. I should do this. I should compromise more. But whichever way that we do that, what people typically do is they don't communicate clearly about it. So that he talks through about how people have these strategies. And he talks about this one is, so we're not explicit about it, and no one really knows what's going on in the other person's mind. And there is a danger in communication, in that if we tell people really what we feel, they'll get angry. And obviously, depending on people's childhood, sometimes there's a learned danger, like a learned danger in arguments. But also there's culturally and socially, there's a whole story of how we should be, and there's a whole level of judgment. And he lists lots of ways that there's lots of thou shalts for relationships, and he lists, I think, 18 or something. So basically all of this leads people to not say what's on their mind, because if we speak out, there's either anger and it escalates, and it can mean the end of the relationship, or there's a rejection and there's a judgment of us. And we might look needy, we might look petty, like, why would I bring this up? I'm going to look like such a bad person. And so sometimes we speak up, but often what we do is we nitpick at things when we're really, so like he gives the example of someone coming home from work, and they wanted to share something with their wife, but the wife greets them at the door of, the kids have done this and this and this, and he's like, like, I can't share. And so he's dissatisfied, and then he's like, well, this dinner's overcooked, it's not very tidy in here, what do you do all day? And what he's really saying is, I'm unhappy with you because I wanted to share with you, and you just attacked me at the door. And so he talks about, in relationships, we can either express anger or we withdraw. And they're two sides of the same coin, that when we express anger, we often get into a fight. And he talks about a fight and a discussion are two separate dynamics, and you can't discuss while you're fighting, because fighting is, in essence, not being heard, neither partner is heard because both are trying to win. And there's this like pattern of behavior where you just try to win. And the basics of a fight is that nobody's listening. Nobody's really there. They're listening for points that they can make. But the alternative is that we don't speak up. And when we don't speak up, what happens is we withdraw, and we withdraw into our own understanding of the person. We relate to that person, and we do things based on our image of that person. And when we don't speak up, that repressed anger builds up and up and up until we actually do express it, but we express it in anger. And what it leads to is that we're not connecting to each other, we're connecting to a projection. And therefore, that's where the connection goes, and that's where the passion goes, and all the spark and all of those things, because we're not, there's not a true connection. Janos.
You say that something very interesting and tiny bit triggered me, because I had a situation where it was very similar as you describe. When people are suppressing, they will come a bit more angry after, and they're expressing that. However, even if the other person remain calm and try to make it a point, the other person will not listen, because he's so much into that feeling. They want to connect with their visions, with their expressions, so they not really listen to be heard. It's just more like, no, you're gaslighting and all this. And that's one of the most dangerous one, because making the other person feel like you're not worthy enough, you're lying to me and everything. So literally it's escalating for something so much bigger after, and as you say, maybe simply the other person just want to withdraw. And I don't know, sometimes maybe it's the best to not even react for the problem, just to observe it. But is that really helpful? Because 90% times, whatever it's happening, is that 5 years later will be really important? No. We just, our own hurt or something what trigger us, we projecting out like other person do that, but actually it's not the person who hurt us, it's the event.
Yeah. So that's really where he talks about solving the moment, because you're not solving the problem, because when you're in that dynamic, it's not, you're not solving the problem, but it's the communication. You're communicating, but not really communicating. To be really communicating, both of you need to be really present and really listening and really speaking about what's going on for you. And I think where the real key to this, like the first step, is a recognition that problems are normal, because people think when there's a problem, he talks about there's 4 types of explanations. That's a character defect. You're a bad person. You're this. You're that. And he gives an example of like this couple have a row, and 4 people explain it unhelpfully, and 7 explain it helpfully. And so, for example, the example he gives is this couple go out on a date, and they go dancing, and he didn't really want to go dancing, but he knows that his wife likes it, so he goes. But then he didn't want to, or he took her somewhere where there was dancing, and he didn't want to dance, and he didn't really want to go there in the first place, but he did this and so that can be explained, that he's selfish because he's not doing it for her, and it can be, and she can be accused of being controlling for making him go there. So when you use character defects, it's basically, it's a bit like Freudian. Like when you explain something in Freudian theory, there's no way to disprove it. And in the same way with character defects, you can't disprove it. You can always find some defect. So unresolved childhood issues, you can say, okay, this goes back to something, or this is what happened in their past, and you can explain everything like that. Or you can say, like, people get the outcome that they wanted, so they must have wanted to frustrate you, and they must have wanted this to happen. And the other one is unrealistic expectations. Now, all of them can be true. It can be someone doing something from a character defect. It can be childhood issues. It can be unconscious ways of setting things up, and it can be unrealistic expectations. But when we use them to explain, it's basically mind reading, that we're creating motives that may or may not be true, and we're guessing. So to bring it back in more directly, so I think when people have fears and anxieties about relationships, and because of that, we tend to believe what we fear, and so we'll take explanations for that. But okay, right. So in that example, like, what do you do? It's really about not trying to solve the problem, but solving the moment. So it's opening up the communication, and so in solving the moment, it has three parts. With solving the moment, doubling, and what he teaches therapists to do, and what his kind of his contribution to therapy is the process of doubling. So what he would do is he would look for what was unsaid. He would try and guess what they might say, and he would share the vulnerable feeling behind that. So, for example, if someone was saying, you always do that, he would kind of sit next to them, and he'd say, I'm going to speak for, I'm going to speak for Sue at the moment. What I fear, John, is, I can't remember the first thing I said, but he would look at, when they say, you always do that, it means I fear that you don't care because you do this, or some kind of, he would pick up on clues and look for what they're really feeling underneath it, and try and get them then to fine tune what the real feeling is underneath that. Because when someone comes to you with angry accusations, underneath those accusations, is a lot of fear, is a lot of anxiety, and it's self-doubt. And so when I sorry, go on, Sandra.
So what you're saying is that you're picking up on the cues rather than the actual thing itself, and the cues are triggering a response in you.
Yeah. So
it's to learn to decouple the cues and the reaction. Yeah.
So it's creating it. So basically, he says problems are pathways to intimacy and clues to important issues. So if there's a problem, if someone's angry, right, at the root of anger is fear. And so when someone says, you always do this, what they mean is, I'm afraid that you might do this. I'm afraid you think this of me. I'm afraid of this. And so in a therapeutic sense, the doubling is expressing that fear, because in a fight, it's hard to have that distance. But if you can have that presence, to have that distance, it's listening that the accusations and judgments someone says are not to react to those, but to look at them as clues. So they are clues for what's underneath it. And it's like typically someone like breathes fire on you and you retaliate. And so then things escalate. And he talks about like the dynamics of fighting, that when we're fighting, we tend to say more provocative things than we actually realize we're saying, because we're trying to get feelings, we're trying to lash out, we're trying to win. And what, like, typically relationship courses will say, okay, you should make I statements instead of you statements. So instead of saying you did this, you should say I feel this. And he lists like 10 of those. But what I like is that you can't, like, I don't think you can really do those. Like if you spent 30, 40, 50 years in a certain way, you're wired in a certain way when you're under stress to react, and to remember like these certain techniques. Yes, they would be for better communication, but we can't always do that. And so I like that he talks about, it doesn't really matter if you don't always do it. What matters is the recovery. So you might not do it when you're when you're angry, but it doesn't really matter. Like it's not the fact that you have angry exchanges which breaks relationships. What breaks relationships is people never talk about the fear underneath the anger. And there's this whole like societal layer of judgment of we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't be this, we shouldn't be needy, we shouldn't be dependent, all of these things, but yet we all are. And it's recognizing that when people behave badly, there's a logic to it. And he's saying like when anger isn't expressed, or doubts or fears aren't expressed, we behave crazily, because there's all kinds of things that make logical sense to someone. But so when someone's angry and it's an outburst, it's trying to get a response. It's because it, like, if you didn't want any more contact with someone, you'd cut off. But so this is what I've always felt, that not all relationships are going to work out, but they don't need to break with people feeling less. So when you look at the time after a breakup, of that time of where people kind of go off the rails and people have such dips and really struggle to like rebuild their lives and really deal with the trauma of the breakup, it's because we never really got a clear communication, and all of that stuff is unsaid. So when we're angry at the partner, we're angry because of we let it happen. We're angry because it made us feel unimportant. We're angry. There's something in that. So so in my experience of you know, talking to people, like seeing relationship after relationship, the first thing almost everyone says, you know, once they feel like they trust you, the first thing they say is, there's something about me. Am I broken? Am I unlovable? And so I think is the core fear that we have in relationships. But we don't say that. We feel like to say that would be, we'd look too needy, we'd look too desperate. And so we project an image. And so I see lots of people like dating, and if you look at like the most popular articles in Cosmo and the YouTube videos and Facebook, it's about, okay, if you want to find Mr. Right or Miss Right, then you need to be the person that attracts them, and you need to project this image. And what's happening in all of this is it's setting up the dynamic that you have to be something other than you. And there is this, like the core problem of society is that we are scared of being vulnerable because we feel we have to project something. And it's like, if you look at like Donald Trump and the whole American dream of, I'm a self-made man and I did this and I'm great and I'm wonderful. And it's an inability, like the strength of someone is like how fragile someone is based on how or the strength of someone is in the ability to be honest about themselves and reveal their weaknesses. Someone who, you know, like a big complaint for women on dating sites or on dates is they meet someone and he just talks about himself. And I did this, I've got this, and I've got this car, and I've got this house, and I did this, and I'm so wonderful. And it comes from a fragility of not feeling you can be loved for yourself, but feeling that you have to impress someone. And so when you look at, for a lot of relationships break when a man's 20, 25 years into it because he's not feeling respected and someone else comes along and sees him in a new light. So I think one of the paths for men in relationships is the maturity to recognize that people aren't always going to feel that you're special. And of course that's true with women as well, but I feel it's more about respect for men. And maybe there's slightly different because of our different cultural programming. So there's that. So it's not being honest. There's also he talks about tokens. And tokens is basically, I think one of the probably the shortcoming of Dan Weil, of why Dan Weil's not better known, is because he had great insights and great theories, but he didn't package it in a commercial way. So tokens is basically like Love Language is I think the most popular relationship book, and it's basically what he was talking about in tokens, but there was more depth to what he talked about in tokens. And tokens is that the idea of, I suppose if you relate it to currency of money, that we're looking for tokens, and tokens are, we're looking for attention, that's a token. We're looking for validation, that's a token. We're looking for someone that sees us as special. We're looking for love. We're looking for affection. All of those things are tokens. And so there's two sides. So there's that token, that kind of what we want. But there's also that we ask for a token of what we actually want. So it's like someone has this fancy of going on a great holiday, and they go, oh no, that's not realistic, it's too much, I can't ask for that. How about we have a nice, we go out to a fancy dinner, And they go, oh, well, you know, money's tight and whatever. And they go, oh, yeah. And often he talks about they do it in their own head. So they don't ask for the holiday. They don't ask for the dinner. They don't ask for the next thing, but they ask for, how come you never bring me flowers? And the flowers, it wasn't the flowers, but the flowers was in their head. They've gone, well, I really wanted the holiday, but I wasn't realistic enough. I wanted a dinner. I wanted this. But I'm asking for a fraction of what I really want. And they won't even give me that. So it's all kind of that in my head. Right. So I've rambled on along. Like, if I just go back to Janos, and then we'll come back to you, Sandra. So did any of that make any sense in terms of your situation? That you,
Yes,
the example you gave?
yes, it is definitely about, you know, the person probably felt that and wanted to express it, and I just didn't understand this way, and I just couldn't feel how the person felt it. Because obviously I didn't went through about the same story, traumas, so therefore I just could not understand the same way. I think we all having a story, and those stories are, yeah, sometimes are just stop us to understand, or actually putting like a plate mail on us, you know, like we're getting defensive, and we're not letting people to close for us, and we like to pushing away. Personally, with me, it's happening when I feel get hurt. I like to pushing away, but inside somewhere, somehow, I wanted somebody to bring closer, and that's one of the worst communication what we do as the humans. We talking loudly and everything, but actually, what we want just a safety environment when we can talk about. And I remember for that, my mom never provided that. So basically, I was just looking for this, the safety container where we can talk about. But thank you.
And often it's because we're both reacting. So yeah, I think we all have our own story, and the problem of a relationship is it's really like having the Matrix and Star Wars in one film. And that's really what the problem of a relationship is. So we have these two different stories. And so the key to a successful relationship is breaking those stories and creating the third. And so that takes an awareness. But because we're emotional, we react to the moment. And this is really what I want to do with Dan Wild's stuff and some of the others, is to give people the language that they're able to have an awareness and have a structure and frameworks to be able to have those discussions. Because while we think we want to impress people and we want to be the cool kid and that's how we get love, it's actually the people that we love are the fallible people. It's the what connection is to humanity, is to flaws and weaknesses. But we just need a means to be able to communicate that. Okay. Yes, Sandra.
I'm thinking that there's an underpinning to all of this, which is not explicit, and that is the expectation when we are in a relationship with someone that they ought to know certain things about us. And so each time we have an issue or a difference of opinion or something, we expect that they know certain things without us having to say them, because we are in a relationship, we are close, you know everything about me. You ought to know that this is important or this is not important, or that this is a trigger point for me, or that this is, I like this versus I don't like that. And so we tend to skip over those things that maybe we ought to bring to the table, because as far as we're concerned, you know, who else is supposed to know? You should know. And the mere fact that you don't know is also an irritant in itself, because it means that you are not giving me the attention. You don't want to try to know me. If you really loved me, you would know this about me.
Yeah. I've heard that so many times. Well, there's a basic assumption of that because we're human, we understand what it is to be human, but we all are unique, and we've all had a unique upbringing. And even words, like words are such a crude tool that we learn them in a context, but we all learn them in different contexts. There's some other ways that he breaks that down as well, in that he talks about we use slogan solutions. So slogan solutions are like, we can say, oh, they've got commitment issues, relationships are a compromise, marriage is 50-50. So we use these kind of slogans that are like platitudes, but they're not all entirely true. And we use them as justification and like kind of judging everyone. They have like the commandments of society, but there's also, when we have complaints, like if you listen to someone complaining, you'll hear them. It's kind of like people are like politicians gathering support for their view, and it's as if being right is democratic. If I get more votes and I get enough people to agree that he's a shit, I win. Like, I'm right. What was it called? Is like, culturally sanctions complaints, like, why are you always late? Being late is wrong. There's certain cultural standards that we hold up to, and then there's like the traditional husband and wife complaints. It's like, you neglect us for work, or you're too soft with the kids, or all of those kind of things. But yeah, it's all ways that we don't actually communicate. Janos.
Also, I believe it's partly, as the human being, we tend to see the error in others, because that's how we grow, that's how it's our culture. And we tend to take that as something like will destroy us, or we lose something, but that's not meant to be for that. And doesn't matter if you will do 99 good things on that day, that one thing's what you're not done, that's they will catch. And how would you feel? And I think that's where it's always where it's the discomfort start in any relation. That doesn't matter, it's partnership or just friendship or workship. It's just simply one saying, oh, you haven't done this, but what about my 99 other things? Problem as the humans, we never realize that what it's underneath. We always just see what it's in the top, that 1%, and we just judging from that one snapshot.
Yeah, I think that's the key message I get from Dan Weil, is relationships are like the tip of the iceberg. And either we're not aware of it, or we don't talk about or don't share. Because and I think part of it is we're not really conscious because we're so busy. I think the story of life is that the more stuff that you can fit in, the more experiences you have, the more stuff you have, is the person who wins. And so there's a temptation to consume more, to do more, and feel like that is life. And because there's so much outward focus, we're often not even aware of what's motivating us, or what we're feeling. And I think when couples, if you stopped couples in the middle of fighting about the toothpaste or something, and ask them what they were really fighting about, I don't think they really know what they're trying to get out of the person, but they're operating from this instinctive operating system. And this is the wiring that was laid down by about the age of 7, mostly. And so that's why we act so childishly, because we're not conscious and really present in that moment. And we don't judge. We judge the quality of the experience with someone. Like if someone's really present and really conscious, we rate that higher. But we don't distinguish between someone who's still thinking about work or the kids than someone who's fully there. We just judge it all the same. And so we assume they've taken the time to think, like Sandra said, to think about what someone else is feeling and knowing them. Yvonne. Okay. Right. So, just see if you're muted. Still can't unmute. Okay, we'll come back to you, Yvonne, if you're able to unmute. Okay. I think we've talked about a lot, and before we go on to the next bit, has everyone got a gist of what we've been talking about? Is there anything that's been unclear that you'd like to talk through, to clarify?
So the approach seems to be not finding that perfect person, but trying to find the perfect responses, behaviors, attitudes, and perspective within that relationship. Okay.
Just to respond to that bit, I wouldn't say the perfect. He's just saying just be yourself, and there's a strong like non-judgmental vibe to it of accepting people as they are.
Okay.
But it's really about it's like be gentle on yourself. You'll make mistakes. Be gentle on them, and it's not about over responding, but it's about, and it doesn't have to be in the moment. It's you could step back, leave that rail go, but just you do need to bring it up of like, okay, what happened? You know, what was really going on for you? What were you really afraid of? Those kind of things. So that, because he explicitly says you can't fight and discuss at the same time. but it's just about the recovery so that you can at some point.
Okay.
So I just wanted to correct that before we went on, just so it's clear. Is there anything else beyond that?
Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit, not because you said that, but even before you'd spoken. So what? Just before you move on, can you just give the take-home message again, and then maybe it'll prompt me.
What generally is really the issue is that we don't expect problems. There's so much judgment that we judge ourselves and we judge others, and we try not to. It's like it's like this commandments, like the 10 commandments, and he talks about the 18 commandments for relationships. Thou shalt not be needy, thou shalt not lust after anyone else, thou shalt not. And it's just recognizing that you're human, and how you respond is how you're built. But it's not wrong, but express it, and not judging your partner either, but talking about what's really underneath that. And it's really, this is the surface, what's underneath that, what's underneath that, what's underneath that. And that is the way that you get to know someone, because you operate on the foundations of what they're really built on, as opposed to your theory of what they're built on. So problems are a clue rather than a danger sign.
Hi Rob, I can talk now.
Can I just finish before you do? Is that right?
Yeah, sure.
My analogy would be, Rob, again, maybe this is where I need to change my perspective, is that a relationship could be akin to a long distance bus journey. And, having somebody in close quarters, very close, you're next to each other. I don't know. I know you're saying not to have we didn't say not to have, but there's a thing here about not having expectations, allowing that person. I mean, that's so radical, because who wants to sit next to somebody who's constantly puking up or farting or being annoying? These are all analogies. So what you're suggesting is love what they're doing. And I think, I don't know how real that is, and who does that, who actually does that. That's my, yeah.
Okay, I love the analogy of the bus journey, because it is really a journey together. But this difference between the bus journey and a relationship is that you have the choice of getting off at any stop. So the main quote I would say that sums up damn well is, when you marry someone, you marry a set of problems. So when you choose who to marry, you're choosing the problems that you'll live with for the rest of your relationship. So whenever you meet, it doesn't mean like the first person you date that you're stuck on the bus with them. It means you get to know the problems, and is an evaluation of, are these the problems I can live with? But the way that you live with the problems is by getting clear about what they really are. And his promise is like, he opens it, like after the honeymoon book, he opens it with secretly everyone thinks their partner is the problem, and they want to change, or he says, you want to change your partner. I could change them for you, like right now, when you won't have to do anything. And it's changing your perspective of them. And the way that you change your perspective of the problem is, instead of your assumed motives and assumed ideas about why they're doing it, you open up the conversation and really get clear on why is that? And it's something from their outlook. And in discussing that, you'll develop the connection with them, because you'll know them on a great level of what makes them who they are. So the way I always think of people is I think of, like, if I'm talking to someone, I'm trying to understand the map. Like they have a map in their head that they're operating from, and I'm trying to understand that. And I'm trying to understand where they are on that map. And it's like a series of locks. Like somewhere there's locked doors and they can't get through to the next bit of the map. And it's finding what is the shift in the way that they need to think, in the way that they're thinking. What is it that they're not seeing? Because for all of us, like every human problem has been solved by someone somewhere. And it's just like the way we can solve it is understand how they looked at the problem differently. And then we can see it in the same light. So it doesn't mean that you have to stay with a person, but that is the part of relationship building, of understanding past the dream that we have of people, what they really are, and what are the things that are going to bug us and annoy us. And it comes from, like the big fights we have: money, sex, children, work, those kind of things. And those fights come from our different approaches and different understandings of money, of sex, of children, all those things that it means. So it's understanding that helps us deal with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Just translating that into real world experience is on the premise, perhaps, now this might be very important, that this takes two conscientious individuals, no? Or is it just one person who says, I'm aware, I'm present, I will observe this, I will allow this person to be a douchebag, it's okay, we can discuss it later. So yeah, are you actually saying it takes two or just one to be present and conscious?
It all depends. You can only connect to someone to the level that they're willing to connect with you. If someone's shut off and they just won't give you, like, you can't understand someone if they won't tell you why. If they're like, I'm not going to talk about that, or they fob you off. Like if someone feels ashamed, they're not going to tell you the truth until they admit the shame. And then I'm like, oh, like if someone isn't going to let you in, then that's the point the relationship will break, because they don't let you in, you can't get any further. And so you have to connect to a projection of them. Like you can only connect to the image that they're projecting. So it can be like, sometimes it is just our I remember years ago, I did neuro-linguistic programming, and Richard Bandler, the founder of that, he talked about, like, one of his books was a transcript of like a therapy session. And what it was a man who you would say has commitment issues. And what he had was a strategy that he would go out, like he'd go out on a date and he'd be really excited about it, and he'd build it up. Yeah. And then sooner or later, he, like, fears would start to come in, and he would say, he, in his head, he would go, yeah, but she's just going to turn out like the rest, and she's going to cheat on me, and she's going to be this. And then he would go, like, he would turn up for the date, and he's like, and he would be really angry with her, and he'd be on the date with her as if he was, like as if she committed all these crimes in his head. And it's like Richard Bandler's like, yeah, why wouldn't you dump that bitch? And it's like she hadn't done any of it, but in his head, his fears and anxieties had created all of this stuff that he made feel real. He demonized her when she hadn't done anything. He didn't know what she was going to do, but because of his anxieties and his fears. So sometimes it's just that, and sometimes it does need both. So, you know, like if someone's a brick wall and they just won't let you in because they're so scared or ashamed or whatever it is, then there's only so far that you can get in. So it all depends on the situation. Does that make sense? And it may be, like if you want to come back, like sometimes I know, like it takes me a little while to think after to process things, but we can come back to that if you want.
I think Yvonne's waiting, so that's fine. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you for your patience, Yvonne. Glad we can finally hear you.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, thanks, Carl. Yeah, no, I don't mind waiting at all. I'm learning as well. I wanted to ask something, but I had somebody mention something about you might have done 1,000 good things, but they just remember that one thing that wasn't. And I really struggle with that sometimes, because not to say I struggled with it a lot, and it's one of the things that I work on a lot. It's like communicating something before it becomes really big, and being afraid to communicate the thing, you know, that kind of icks me, in the fear that it will not recognize the other things that I do recognize, because then I find like I only then start noticing the things that I shouldn't notice. I don't know if that makes sense. But then on the other hand, by not communicating that thing, it then ends up blowing up and becomes a big thing. And it's like knowing how to communicate and say, you know what, that, you know, when that happened, I wasn't best pleased because of this reason, or this is how it made me feel inside, or you know, and it's not like it's about you, it's about me having to deal with the reason why I went through that. But I want you to know that, or maybe when you say something to me in this way, it makes me feel like this, and you know, it reminds me of when, I don't know, my dad used to speak to me like that when I was a kid and I didn't like it, and something like that. But you know, on the other hand, this and this and this and this has happened, that it's not about you at all. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's one of those things that I'm really learning how to communicate. And then the other thing I wanted to say was, I think you were talking, Rob, about something about anger, and you know, and somebody expressing something from a place of anger, and then that other person being able to accept that, you know what, you didn't mean what you said, and it's about the recovery. But my fear in if you like, constantly communicating from a place of anger is that it can become a pattern. It can become like a go-to place to communicate. And I think a lot of the times it's like, is it worth for me to fast, go like, you know what, just remain quiet, even if, you know, the other person asks, you know, what's up, why are you quiet, just, you know, no, it's okay, it's fine. But then later on go like, you know what, I was quiet because of this reason, but I need time to process it first before I can talk about it. I find that like much more productive, much less stressful, even for myself, because I find when I communicate from a place of anger, it's just so draining. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, so like the focusing on the one thing, I think, is just inbuilt into us. You know, when there's 99 good things and we focus on the one, I think that's inbuilt into us because fear just dominates our attention. Yes, so like the idea of doubling, or like his therapeutic technique is basically revealing the vulnerability beneath the statement, or beneath the anger. So most of the time in arguments, we don't our focus is on the other person. And so our focus is like blaming the other person. And when someone is accused, they just shut down, and they'll lash out, and because it's like no one can be criticized. Like if you criticize people, no one says, you know, can you criticize me a bit more, please? It causes people to shrink. So really it's about, we can be at our best or we can be at our worst. When we're angry, we're at our worst. When we feel bad, we're at our worst. And so the ethos of this whole approach is that we are collaborative partners. So it's collaborative couples therapy, because we're collaborating with the problem. So the attitude is like we're working together. So there's something else coming to mind, and I can't remember who. I don't think this is Dan Weil, but it's no, this is Alan Parker. Alan Parker is an Australian like mediator. He mediates like the United Nations, Microsoft board. Like he'll just sit outside all day while they have a board meeting, and then he'll come in when they're stuck. And his expertise is neurobiology, neurochemistry of what happens in the brain. And he says when mammals face each other, it's to fight or to fornicate, because it like being directly together arouses the nervous system. And so his one of his tools is you sit side by side. And he also has like his genius is using his body to communicate. So he's a facilitator and a mediator, and his thing is reading the room and knowing who needs to speak to get things unlocked. And so his approach is very collaborative. And so whenever you want to be cool and composed, you want to sit side by side. And so and he also like uses gestures. So like he uses his hand, and he uses his hand as in, okay, so let's put the problem in our hands. Because then the problem's not between us. And also the eyes are focused. So what he'll do is he'll move, okay, so let's talk about this problem. And what he's doing is he's moving it away so that you're sitting side by side looking at the problem. And so what that's doing is it's calming it down, and it's creating a dynamic where you're working on it together. So the dynamic where you're coming from anger, which is typically what couples do, is the dynamic where you're coming from anger is that you have to win. That if you lose, like the like if you break down the structure of how we think and the structure of an argument, we get so angry because we're afraid when we lose, it means like if we talk about the idea that people have two different worlds, and a couple fight is two different worlds, it's each fighting for their vision. The anger is, I have this dream of this perfect life that will make me happy. You need to be like this for me to be happy. And they think I will be happy because in their picture, you're happy too. And the anger comes from the fear that it won't happen. So the whole idea of this philosophy is that dream, that ideal that you're working for, that you're fighting for, is an error. Because because no one's going to live out your fantasy life. Like, they're not going to walk into your dream and be the partner that you wanted them to be. So the discussion starts with that understanding that you both have this inbuilt dream that you're trying to make the other fit into, and the anger comes from the fear that that's not going to happen. Does that make sense so far?
Some of it, yes. I think how I'm understanding it is anger comes from the projection onto the other person rather than dealing with it yourself. You're looking at that person to be the savior or the solution. But
okay, can we take a step back?
yeah.
And I'm going to ask you, when you get angry, or just to think about, when you get angry in like in that kind of argument, in that kind of relationship, what are you really angry about? Because the anger is about the toothpaste, all of this stuff, but really underneath that, what does that mean? Like,
You see, this is a funny thing. I rarely get angry about small things. If I find toothpaste hasn't been put, like my kids do it all the time, you know, they'll just go in there, brush the teeth, they throw it, and I'm like super like, you know, when things shouldn't be in the right place and things like that. I notice because I really like things being orderly. But if I go into the bathroom, which, you know, just like it's every day and the kids haven't put the toothpaste cap on and put it back into the toothpaste place, I just put it on. And the same if it's might have done something like that. So small things don't annoy me. Small things don't anger me. The things that annoy me is when the same thing happens that's an emotional thing.
okay,
Like when somebody has done something in the past and it's caused me hurt, and then, you know, they know it's caused me hurt and then they do it again. Yeah, you know, that really, that hurts me, that, you know, that really, yeah, that's the kind of thing that will hurt me. Do I get angry to the point where I'm screaming? It takes a lot for me to get really angry, as in somebody must have really done something horrible.
okay. So when you get angry in that example, if we use that example, what are you angry at?
I think it's the fact that the person's done it and they're doing it again, and I know I'm going to be in pain again, and I don't want to be in pain. It's the relieving of the pain
Okay,
before it happens, if that makes sense. As in, you've done this in the past, you've acted in this way, and this is the result, and I'm seeing signs that this could happen again.
okay,
And I know I'm going to get hurt because I've got hurt before when this has happened.
okay. So if I'm like, I would have a guess that the fear is that this behavior shows this thing, and this behavior shows that it's becoming a pattern and I'm going to get hurt in the future.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, because we've been down this road before. Yeah.
So my fear is that this relationship isn't going to work out in the way that I want.
This relationship is a source of pain.
And it's not gonna be the dream that I want.
No, because nobody wants to be in pain all the time.
So do you see, like, the fear is what fuels the anger? I know it's not great anger for you, but it, like, people have different levels of anger, different levels of volatility, but the process is still the same. So-
What I do, I just remove myself completely.
But in feeling that anger, what creates the anger is the fear.
Yeah, I think it's the fear of abandonment, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's the fear of this is so painful. It's almost like completely abandoned. I think because I'm so used to dealing with so much that it's very few things that really anger me.
Well,
It's very few things that unbalance me, if that makes sense.
yeah.
It takes a lot.
Well,
I think the only thing that really angers me is if I'm really afraid something will happen to my children. I think that's the one thing that I know I can easily lose. If I know my kids are going to get hurt, that's the one thing that I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that reminds me of Dr. Mario Martinez's work, and he says there's 3 core fears, 3 core wounds, and that is abandonment, betrayal, and shame. And so, like, you could link real anger to those being triggered, those fears.
I think mine's betrayal then.
So
when it's my kids, maybe abandonment, and then when it's with a partner, it's betrayal.
okay. Yeah. So the row is really because something has shaken your world of the well-being of your world. And in the same way, their anger is because something has shaken what they like, their dream of what they want for you both. So we argue about this what's happened, but we don't really open up. So like the whole process of doubling would be for, like a therapist would say, like I feel I feel whatever, the vulnerability beneath what you feel. Like I feel angry about this because and often we don't have words because we haven't really linked all these things together. But it's about I feel angry because this has happened before, and because it's happened before, I'm worried that it's a pattern of behavior, and I'm worried that this isn't going to work out. And I really love you, and I really want us to work out, and yet this behavior, this incident, makes me afraid that it's not going to work out. So do you see how that might open up a discussion?
It's not a natural
Sorry?
It's not a natural way for me to
No. So what where's the challenge with it?
I think normally I would communicate on the very surface level of when this happened, this is how I felt. And this was my thinking behind what I felt. But I would not think of saying it's because these are my fears based on whatever it has been in the past.
I mean, it all depends on the situation, and we're talking in an abstract way. We're not feeling the emotions, and we
Okay, let me give you an example then. So we went with my other half to play to the range. And when we're at the range, he's like super competitive and he gets into his zone. And I was practicing my swing, and unfortunately I got too close to him, and he was just going to hit the ball and hit my club instead, and he just went off on one at me. And he's like, you shouldn't be doing that, you shouldn't be doing that, you shouldn't be here. And I just felt talked at, like, you know, like a child, and had this little ick, you know. So for me, you know, it was like boom, and I just, you know, I just felt quite red. You know, like, okay, I get that I was in the way, but it's not like an always thing. I hadn't been in the way always kind of thing. And I didn't communicate it, kind of thing. Does that make sense? But in that instance, that was, you know, it went on in quite a good afternoon, but I kept that. I didn't say it. I just kept, you know, I kept that, and was like, and it's a way. And then I noticed the pattern in his communication, which I hadn't noticed before. You know, like it wasn't just this one incident, it was then something else and something else and something else. Yeah, if that makes sense. And it was a way of him communicating where he gets into this place where it can be quite condescending in the communication pattern.
Okay. So you've like noticed there's a pattern.
Yeah.
So what do you, so like when there's a pattern, this is obviously something that you've given some thought. What do you attribute it to?
In terms of his communication, or the times it happens?
Yeah, I mean, so are you saying, so what one, so you haven't brought it up, and you haven't had an argument about this?
No, I went really quiet, and he was going like, so what's going on? Why are you really quiet? And I thought to myself, I need to process this first before I say anything. And I was just like, no, it's okay, nothing's wrong. And of course, you don't want to ruin the whole day as well.
Yeah. You know, I'm like that. I don't really process things because I don't really know how I feel and that, and it's later that I put it together and I go, hang on, this. So yeah, I think some people can do it in the moment. For me, but I think this is something that's between you, because it's something that you've noticed. It's like triggering maybe fears, maybe but the pattern that most people would get into is they go, okay, oh yeah, I see, he's just a bully, or he's like controlling, or whatever it is. And this whole thing is about using that, because the way that he behaves and the way that he's interacting is because of a reason. And you could say it's because of childhood issues. You could say because he's an angry person because of whatever. But your ability to say, okay, this, you know, when I've noticed this a couple of times, and for me, it makes me worry, because it brings back, you know, how I felt, you know, when it makes me feel like a child, and it brings back times when I was spoken to like that as a child, and it shuts me down, and I don't feel like I can say anything. I feel like I'm not, I feel like a child. I don't feel I have the power or voice to be able to say how I feel, and I feel like how I feel doesn't really matter to you. And that kind of communication can open up, and not, of course, like Carl was talking about, not everyone's going to respond to that. But if you can, often you'll find that there's some story, like for someone to react with anger, there's some kind of fear. I think, like, if this was a couple interaction, I would probably look at where there's something like the competitiveness. The competitiveness is about needing to be seen to be good at things. It's needing to create an image. It's he cares what you think of him. There's some deep rooted, probably, like I would guess at this, there's probably some deep rooted fear that he's not feeling good enough unless he shows you how good he is at golf. So what is the fear that made him react with anger? Because at the core of, I talked about that, I think marriage or a relationship can often turn two people who love each other into two people who hate each other. And what it is because, like most people, I think if you look at most people are generally good people. They want to do the best. They want to be good. They want to be kind. It's just that we do bad things when we feel picked on, or we feel afraid, or we feel that we have to. So like if you look at almost every criminal, like murderers and whatever, if you look at their statements, you know, like I'm a good person, I just stand up for myself, and this can be like, I remember, is it Billy the Kid who shot loads of people, and he said, I'm just a good person, it's just I stand up for myself when people pick on me. And he was, I don't know, like robbing people or whatever. But if you look at in the makeup of someone, it's how they see the world, and they're reacting to their fears in that situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And the
It's
way
about communicating and then watching the reaction from the communication and then making a decision, rather than not communicating at all and then letting it get out of control. And then deciding based on the level of communication whether that is a pattern. So that's going to bring the misery that you marry into misery when you marry a person, kind of thing. I think that's how I'm understanding it, as in it's not about the person or their reaction, it's about whether you can learn what it is about yourself that you need to learn from that interaction. Does that make sense?
It is, and an invitation for them to learn about you and for you to learn about them. So when you try to resolve conflict in this way, what you're doing is an invitation to connect. You're saying, okay, like I'm going to share how I made up, why this makes me feel like this. And it's an invitation for them to share, that you want to listen and you want to understand, okay, so what's happened that makes you react like that? Like, what is it about that situation that made you angry? What did I do? And if someone's open, and you're able to go like down the levels, you'll find that it triggered something from them. So in the same way that anger is triggering you because of stuff that no one else knows about what's happened in your life, it's probably triggering stuff in his. So the ability to have a good relationship is the ability to be able to go past our overreactions, and past all of that stuff, and to connect. Because what connection really is, like a really like a successful relationship over many years, is, say, like a husband and wife. They know each other, like you can see their interaction, and you'll judge it on one level, but it's different to them because they understand like how someone's reacting is in line with who they are and what's happened to them. So it's not about what happens, but it's about the meaning that you give to what happens. So if you can understand what gave rise to that anger, you understand a bit more of them. And it's not necessarily that you're then making a picture of, okay, this is that. It's about, for that moment, creating a connection. And if you can create a connection from that, then it's not about like you judge that, but it's about you, it's looking at how deep you can go into that connection. So I wouldn't, I mean, obviously if there's lots of nuance to all of this. So it's not, okay, I'm going to judge this and I'm going to look for these red flags. Like people are always going, oh, okay, tell me the red flags. And the assumption beneath that red flags is that if someone does this, someone's like this. And it's like that all people are mathematical formulas, but people aren't. You can explain people in numbers, but you can also explain them in literature, you know, and people are more refined than this plus this equals this. There's much more complications involved in that. Does that make sense in that?
Yeah, I get it. I think I understand it. And if we judge other people as trying to look at them in numbers, it's kind of like we're trying to keep ourselves safe, isn't it, so that we don't get hurt. But then, from what you said before, relationship is about vulnerability and being able to understand the other person rather than building a big fence.
Yeah, it's that dynamic of don't hurt me, that attempt to protect. That's why we hold on to that dream, because we feel if we don't have that dream, we're going to get hurt. And our anger at other people is at the core because we think our dream isn't going to come true because they're not going to play their part. The truth is that we get hurt because of the meaning that we give. And if we really open up, the opening up changes us as much as it changes them. Because the more that we understand, we start to see that the dream that we had wasn't really the dream. It was, it's like if you have a dream, it's a way of organizing all what's in your head. And that dream is a narrative that makes sense of it, but it's not the only narrative and it's not necessarily the best narrative. So when you have that input from both of you, you can create a better narrative. I'm just noticing, I know we're going to go to Janos, but I think Sandra's got something to say on this point.
It just dawned on me that when we talk about certain things, as you say, the numbers, black and white, you know, it's this, that, whatever. I think many people have more or less, to some degree, the ability to spot an issue. You know, it's this or X or Y, but that to me sometimes is not really the major deal breaker. It's the gray areas, it's the subtleties, it's that's what we don't read. We are not very good at reading those things. And so the hurt and the anger and the lack of trust sometimes arises not from the actual thing itself, but that bit in between that we can't interpret, that we're not clear on, that the other person sometimes doesn't help us to get any clarity on. And so we start to also give unclear feedback. We also respond because we are uncertain with very vague statements, which adds to the confusion. It doesn't help, it doesn't give clarity, it increases the confusion. It takes us away from the main point. So I think that we have to be careful in how we look at the issues, because the issues themselves, you know, can probably be identified if we're willing to, and if we own up to the issue. But it's the interpretation thereof, the ability to articulate the issue properly, that will lead us to a resolution, or yeah, a resolution that is understood by both parties.
Mm.
So I think that is where some of us are not as good as others in terms of really looking at the what I would call the gray areas in and around the problem or a situation. Because things spill over. I find that when you have one issue, there are lots of arms to it. It's almost like an octopus. You know, you've got the central bit and you say, okay, this is the head. But then there are lots of arms with little things on it that are tangential to, but nonetheless, you find that sometimes people go off onto the tangents because they're easier to get muddled in or whatever, rather than dealing with the real concrete thing that's sitting in front of you, you know. And I think that is how the what if, what about, when, how come, you know, all of those little things that get thrown into an argument when you're actually probably dealing with something that is very, very difficult to deal with, or very painful. I find that when it's very painful in particular, we tend to sometimes skirt around it rather than deal with the central issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I think it is. It's like digging. Like you need to dig. What's the root of that? What and then underneath that there's another root, and then underneath that, and it's constantly digging out, and then there's a whole structure. So I know, like sometimes I talk about like the history of relationships, and people say, "How's this relevant?" Well, just tell me what I need to say, and it's because the structure of a problem has been created long before the problem ever appeared. The problem is the head. Like, you know, like if you have a spot, is the head of it, like there's a whole structure underpinning that. So it is going deeper. And there was something else I was gonna, I've lost my friend. We'll leave you a moment to process it. If there's anything else you want to come back on that, Yvonne. But we'll move to Janos, who's waiting very patiently.
It's all right. I just want to add it a little bit even for that, by talking about pain. In the last few years, I've been recognized pain is nothing more, just a signal from our body. It just literally try to teach you, is there something more to work on it? Is that physical, mental? It's up to you how you react on it. Like example, if I got something I had in the past, when it's really triggered me, like if I done the 99 good things and that one things I didn't, I get punished work-wise. What was associated that for me, when I went deeper on it and I stand on that signal, I recognize it. It's remind me for that time when my father took out the belt because I didn't bring the right score for him. And he used the belt on me until I didn't fall off the metal from it. And he put me in the corner for hours in the bins after. That's actually always triggered me, and I didn't know until I didn't went deeper on it. Yes, it was very painful again to go through, but that's the only way how you can get healed, to go again inside and change the narrative. He did it his best, what he could do on that time. Was the best decision? For his knowledge, probably. In my perspective, wasn't. But guess what? Things are done and it's done. I can't really change. And in the end of the day, I realized that's actually not losing anymore for me. I actually have to say thank you for that lesson to show me who I don't want to be in the future. So it's really show me that's all about. And I think that's sometimes the businesses are doing as well with the people. Why so low the engagement? Because people don't know how to motivate each other. They only see that one thing's what it's not done. What about the rest? How we can actually appreciate each other, to recognize that that person, it's actually there every day. It's not ruining your day, it's actually helping. Fortunately, he only can help your days as much he could capable. But it's our job to show, look, you're stepping the boundaries. Let's get back. Let's talk about. Let's make it this work together. And none of us will lose. Because physically we're just so much attached for the things. And when we attach it, we don't want to lose nothing. And I think to detach for the things, we so much quicker can recognize the problem and rectify it. But until you just attach it emotionally, physically, you can't, because you feel you're losing yourself. But at the end of the day, there is no losing. There is only lesson. Teach you to do something different way. Thank you.
Yeah, I always kind of, think back to Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, who was a Holocaust survivor who then developed his own therapy, logotherapy, of basically the meaning we make. And his lesson from Auschwitz was that there were greedy people, there were bad people, there were good people, there were happy people, there were sad people, all in the same situation, the very worst thing that we can think of in life. And some people made it, like made the best of it, or made it, or slant. I think we all slant the world in whatever way, and we're all trying to slant the world in a way that makes us feel good about ourselves. And yeah, pain is mostly about how we've constructed the story. And this is where I think that if couples, not every relationship is going to work, but if couples are able to be as honest, not as honest, if couples are able to really communicate well, then you should, like, if you could really be open and honest, you could get to a state where you'll say, okay, this isn't going to work because we really don't want the same thing and we're really not working together well. But I think you can leave that relationship without feeling like you're less, because I think what I see are people who are so devastated by a relationship breakup that I can't remember, but it can take people 3, 5, 10 years to get over a breakup. And it's because, like when people go through a breakup and they're really in that trauma and they're like, talking to all their friends endlessly about what went on and why it was, and they say that they're looking for closure, what they really mean is they don't understand what happened. They're scared it will happen again. They're scared it's a problem with them. When you're able to have a relationship where that you've got that clear communication, you can leave the relationship knowing that it was a problem, like between the two, like you just weren't you weren't wanting to choose that problem, or someone wasn't wanting to choose the problem of the dynamic of the way that you are, and how that affects their story. And so that leaves people not feeling like, oh, I was dumped, no one will ever want me. They don't feel less, they don't feel broken by the experience, they don't feel like 5 years later obsessing about their social media, about why they did what they did, trying to find the gossip of to try and make sense of what they did and why they did it, which you're never going to get in those ways. And so for me, that's really, it's not necessarily that the relationship works out, because not all relationships work out, but it's that you give it, first of all, you give it a better chance of working out. This is all about thresholds. This is all about probabilities, because it's not going to work on everyone, and it shouldn't. But it's not that there is the one, it's that there is the one that you commit to. So it's not that there is only one out there that it's ever going to work with. There's lots of people that there's out there that it works with, but is the one that you find, that you choose, you can live with their problems, and you're able to build a shared dream together and get to know each other. And that is really, and then even if the relationship doesn't work, there's no reason that you don't need to be civil or be friends, because you haven't hurt each other. The real problem with relationships is that our fears and anxieties mix, and our nervous systems create the they create the atmosphere of hostility, where we feel we have to fight our corner, where we feel we have to fight to be heard, fight to be accepted. And that is the real tragedy of relationships. And that actually leads us to next week's talk, where we're going to talk. Janos?
I just want to add one little things about now when you said about chemistry, how it's changing in our body. Mihai, Csikszentmihalyi, he have a really nice, information about how you can handle your triggers, how you can actually be in the present moment, just to know how to control all these emotionally overhand situations by simply in a neuroscientific stage. I love it, honestly. It's a very good research. It's worth to have a look on it. It's really helped me, my triggers, to put it more down and understand and after respond.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, most of us never really think about our triggers. Like, who's aware of what triggers them? Go on, Janos, what triggers you?
I'm using actually my triggers in circum environment to bring my best from it. If you already recognize it, but if not, it can be bring the worst from you.
Okay, so what would trigger you?
For me, circum situation, like sometimes when people are criticizing with the right amount, it can trigger me to, I'm gonna show you, I don't care. I'm gonna be the best and I'm gonna show. Also, I know when I do have those circum pains, it's actually what trigger me is to go for having bigger pain. To actually those pain to catalyst for something different, to be more calm down, to be more, that's why I like to go to the workout. And when actually I see in my toes as well, when it starts working like that, I feel like, okay, I'm getting triggered, I need 5 minutes break, and I'm going meditation. I can feel in my body, in a certain body part, and I know what to do, and I keep learning that. But that's all about present. That's all about the flow.
Yeah. Anyone else on the point of triggers?
I know one trigger, and maybe the ladies might disagree with me, but I'm triggered quite easily when it's kind of like a specific, close to a specific time of the month, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to be really aware of that because I know quote unquote small things wouldn't affect me as much at other times, but then they would, yeah.
Here is a trigger which might seem to be trivial to some people, but for me, it sets me off. If I'm out eating, dining, do not take food out of my plate. Do not help yourself. I do not approve, and it drives me crazy.
Cannot taste yours.
First of all, it's just bad manners, okay? So that's that. Secondly, you have not asked me anything. In other words, you're ignoring me. You don't know if what you're taking out of my plate is something that I really relish and want to have. So you're depriving me. You're invading my space. You're doing everything that's just wrong. That's, and that just gets me, annoyed, angry. Don't do it. You have all been warned.
Don't touch. It's like Joey on Friends, isn't it?
No, but if you ask me, I'll give it to you. This is the thing. Just say, can I, I'd love to taste that, or just, whatever. Just ask. Don't take. And that translates into other parts of my life. Just don't take my things without asking, which is why I use that as the thing, because that is the trigger. It's, I treasure things, but I'm not obsessed by them, in the sense that I take care of things. And if you see something that I have that you like and you would like it, don't steal it. Just ask me, I'll give it to you. Or don't break anything and hide it. Those are my triggers. I hate people who seem to, it's almost like desecration of your space and who you are and the things that you have, in a sense. And so it's not the thing itself, it's what it translates into meaning.
Sandra, is it about respect in that case?
It's about respect of space and the things that, because we are a composite of all the things that we are about, I think so. The things on the one hand represent extensions of my personality and the things that I like and my hobbies and so forth. So respect them. Like if I have a book, like if I buy a book and you want to look at it, do not break the spine. I am going to throw that book at you. I do not take off the book cover Do not break my book spine. Do not crease my pages. Do not mark any pages. I will kill you. Do not do it, right? Yeah, so it's that kind of thing. I take care of things, but I will give them to you. I'm generous with them. Okay, so I think what that says to me is that I'm a caring person. I care for people. I just care for things in general, if you know what I mean. So the inanimate things, what I demonstrate comes across for people as well. I care for people in like manner, and I don't throw my friends away easily. If you know, I care for them and I cherish them and all the rest of it. So yeah, when you deface something, or it translates across friendships, it translates across things. And yes, the bottom line is respect. I think I agree with you, Yvonne.
Yeah, I know for me, it's selfishness. And if something isn't quite true, particularly like if someone is telling something that's not true, and for me, like I deeply value knowledge, and the knowledge that people operate off, and that really jars me. Okay, thank you, everyone. So next week we're going to go further into this, and we're going to look at Howard Markman's his work on relationships and conflict, and where really he talks about what we're really fighting about. Are we fighting about power? Are we fighting about control, care, all of those things? Before we go, is we're all listened to this, and we've all contributed, and we've all like heard from each other's perspectives. Is there any thoughts that we've taken from this that anyone wants to share? So we all might take different parts. So what would you take from tonight? Like, what has your reaction been to it? Or your
Definitely,
interpretation?
I really like it, the way how you express it, that the illusions, and we do all working by bias, and because of that assumptions, we just projecting quite often, and we're not really searching for the reality, and we're not observing. We just kind of already got a pre-narrative information in our head, and this should be a little bit more, change it down, little bit reduce it, and see in different way, and just simply curiously asking more, get deeper and deeper and deeper.
What has stuck in my brain is this, and I'm going to think about it some more, is the notion that you can't change, working to change someone is not the idea of a relationship. It's what you see is what you get to work with. It's I think I'm being clumsy, but in a sense, the person, as you say, it's a set of problems that you have to deal with. And that's what I mean by that. The person comes as they are, with their, their idiosyncrasies and all the rest of it and stuff. But bear in mind that you also come with your own set. So how to negotiate to get a blend of those two sets of problems and traits and quirks, to actually work together as a unit. And it's not about changing anything of the other person. it's more about yourself being able to accommodate and cope with, and in a sense, I suppose it's a kind of an organic situation wherein if you are seen to be making accommodations and working towards contentment, or a sort of, a sort of balance, that the other person is also working in their own way to help to achieve that kind of center ground that you both can coexist. So it's not about trying to destroy faults or get the person to remove them and denigrate them about it. Yeah, it's about you finding a way of enabling your triggers not to react to it, not for it to become a negative trait that you use it to belittle or degrade the person's self-esteem, etc., because of it. And also for you not to be too sensitive about your own issues, wherein your partner cannot address. Well, we all have to learn how to address and how to negotiate and how to speak without it being painful and hurtful and spiteful and seen to be denigrating another person. But I think it is about having that conference table wherein the issues are on the table and one actually airs the issue in a clear manner, in a manner that encourages truthful and open acknowledgement, and finding a way forward in terms of how to deal with it, if it's something that requires treatment, or if it's just an acknowledgement, to acknowledge it without it being seen as a sin, for want of another word, if you know what I mean, something that's just bad outside of the relationship. And to have a way where you can arrive at a kind of a consensus, about what's palatable for the relationship. Yeah, that's my summation of what I was getting from this evening.
I really like that. I mean, what comes to mind with me when you talked about like take someone as they are, or whatever, I can't remember the exact words you said, but it's like people are made up, like what the imagery that came up is like people are made up of Lego, and you can only make what, like you can only make whatever recipes that you have the ingredients for. You can only make what models that the Lego pieces have, but it's about breaking them apart and then putting them together in a new way. Yeah, and the need for acceptance of yourself and acceptance of your partner. Thank you. Anyone else?
I think my biggest takeaway was communication on a deeper level. And the only way, well, not only, that's not the right word. The way to communicate on a deeper level is to understand yourself as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I always think you don't have to change for a great relationship, but a great relationship will change you. Because yeah, the understanding of yourself, just as Dan Weil says, every relationship has unique treasures and unique problems. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you everyone. I look forward to seeing you next week. We'll talk more about Howard Markman's ideas, and he's got the five key skills to relationships. But I'm really interested in digging in more into Like, what are people really fighting over? So see you next week. Have a good week, everyone. Bye.
See you.
Thank you.
Thank you.